Awesome.
Somebody online say, you guys online can hear, right?
All good.
Okay.
Beautiful. All right. Oh, I totally walked away. Okay. Okay. I'll be like right here. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Hi, so I'm Willa Coultley. I'm a paleontologist at the University of Oregon, attempting to get my PhD. Will it work? We don't know. We're hoping so, though. What I'm presenting is called Take to the Skies, a new modern albatross from the Pacific Northwest, which is really exciting because this will potentially be my first author paper that I published this year. I have some co-authors, primarily Dr. Julia Clark from the Jackson School of Geosciences at UT Austin, as well as Pat Ward and Edward Davis. Edward Davis is my principal investigator and advisor at the University of Oregon, and Pat Ward is, for the most part, sometimes still our preparator, one of our preparators at the university, and his other job is working for the Bureau of Land Management now. This project started out as a term project for my first actual paleontology class I'd ever taken. Your goal was to, pick a fossil out of the vault, identify it down to the species if you could, and write a fancy paper on it. And I just got lucky and got the bird that no one wanted to work on, and it turned out to be a new species of bird, which is really exciting. So this presentation will be kind of introducing you to albatrosses and then the process behind identifying the fossil, down to the species and genus level, and going from there. All right. So first we want to ask, what actually is an albatross? They are one of the largest flying bird that exists today. It has a wingspan typically of about 6 feet. So if you put your arms out, that's as big as this bird is, or most albatross are. They are related to storm petrels and shearwaters, so other kind of smaller marine birds that like to skim the surface of water, pick up squids, fish, any kind of things that they can munch on in the ocean. And then we have my fossil. And then 3 meters is about that. That's about 9 feet actually, wingspan. I apologize for that. All right. And so it turns out there's more than one type of albatross in the modern today. We have the, sorry, that's kind of distracting. All right. It's all good. I apologize for that. All right. So we have our sooty albatrosses, which is this one right here. This is a southern hemisphere albatross. We have the short-tailed albatrosses, which is this one. And then we have our wandering or great albatrosses, those really big ones, which is this guy up here. And then we have, I'm forgetting the common name for it, but Thassalarchi is the other South Pacific albatross. And that is the one in the middle. So they all share these common features, and I'll go more in depth to that as well. One of the fun controversies among albatrosses is that we have determined that there are 4. Oh, that's right. So we have these 4 genera, so these common kind of groupings of albatrosses. But the fun part is that we don't know how many modern species there are. It's super controversial going back to like about the 60s and 70s and going forward. Bird biologists keep debating and going back and forth with molecular techniques or morphometric and morphologic. So what does the bird actually look like? How does it behave? And depending on your species concept, what you define as a species will determine how many species of modern albatross there are, which is why there's between 14 and 24 species. Love it. That's so wonderful. So, and so, again, these are where they're found. We have our mollywocs, the sooty albatross, mollywock was Thassalarchi. That was mollywock is its common name. And the wandering albatross, which typically inhabit the southern hemisphere, especially along the Pacific. We don't typically find albatrosses in the Atlantic anymore, but they were there previously in the fossil record. And then we have our only North Hemisphere albatross, which is our North Pacific or short-tailed albatross. And so I'm talking about all of this. How are they all related? So we generally think that the common ancestor of all modern albatrosses and then their relatives, the shearwaters and petrels, split about 35 to 30 million years ago. And then we find our anatomically modern albatross, our common species today, at about 15 million years, where the great albatross and the North Pacific are more related to each other than to the sooty and mollymox. And so my question with this project was, what happens when you find a new species in the fossil record? What do you do with that? Like, what's going on? Why? Why would we do this? Because it's fun. And so I'm going to be introducing MNCH F47133. I like to call him Munchie, short for the Museum of Natural and Cultural History. After my talk, I actually have the specimen with me on the table, so we can share about that. Touch and feel him all you want. He's very, very beautiful. So the story behind Munchie is that he was found between either 2008 or 2011. I do not remember off the top of my head. By a bunch of volunteers and undergrads in the Astoria Formation in Oregon, in Newport. And then he sat on a shelf for a really long time because he looked like a just concretion with two bits of bone sticking out on either end. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is probably a rib. That's not interesting. He can be, settle that later. Pat Ward decides that he's bored during around the pandemic, 2018, 2019 into 2020. And then he wants to try acid prepping. And so he's like, you know what, this rib, beautiful specimen to try. Acetic acid and wear away the matrix around the bone. And then what do you find in this really weird conglomerate? An actual bird, which are very, very uncommon in the fossil record in Astoria. There's actually only 2 documented other birds so far in the literature and outside of the literature that have yet to be published. One is a toothed bird from the very early Miocene, late Oligocene, and the other is called the Astoria albatross, which I will get into because it turns out the Astoria albatross and this albatross are not the same species, but are from the same time period, which is super fascinating. And I'll get more into that. So Munchie is the skull, beak, and then first 3 vertebrae of the neck all articulated or put together. And this is what he looks like. So on the far side is his top. So if you're looking down on it, it's the top of his, that's the top down view. And this is the bottom view. So under the skull. And then we have, to orient you, we have his beak, his skull, and then his little neck bones. And so again, where does Munchie fit among all these highly controversial species of albatrosses? Is he related more to storm petrels? Is he more related to modern albatrosses, but not quite modern itself? Is he actually modern, but maybe outside of the group of albatrosses that we consider today? Or is it something really wacky and crazy and he's way closer related to Southern Hemisphere albatrosses than anything that's found in the North Pacific? And so to do that, what do we do from here? We decide on our species concept. So how are we defining a species in the fossil record? There are multiple ways to do that in there. All have their benefits and downsides. One of the nice things about paleontology is that you don't have soft tissue usually, and you can't figure out if things were able to produce fertile offspring. So we use the morphology version of the species concept, where animals that are related to each other will have more similar forms than those that are outside of that group. And then we will compare him. So we have our species concept. And now we have to compare Munchie to storm petrels and shearwaters. And then we need to compare him to extinct other albatross relatives. And then compare him to the modern stuff just to top it off and confirm everything's where it's supposed to be. And then to do this, again, here's my species concept, related species will have similar anatomical characteristics. Older species will share traits with outgroup relatives, so things that are outside that original family, so something closer to a shearwater than a modern albatross. And younger species will share traits with their more modern relatives, or closer related to albatrosses in this case. And so I keep saying that Munchie is an albatross, but I've yet to prove to you how I know that. One of the first things I did was look into the literature. What has been published on the Astoria Formation? Turns out there's only 2 types of birds found. And it's like, all right, so he's most likely one of those 2. Let's, he doesn't have teeth, so he's not that toothed bird. He might be an albatross. Let's figure out what actually makes an albatross anatomically. And one of those is their beautifully concave culmen, or this little rounded concave edge to their beak is one of them. Another one, or here's Munchie having his slow slope down his beak. They also have a hooked at the end of their beak. Unfortunately, Munchie does not have that, but it didn't show the animation. Typically, you would actually, if his hook was preserved, it would just be a little boop right there. Unfortunately, again, he doesn't have that. There's also a furrow along the beak, which is really truly indicative of modern albatrosses. No other bird that I've found so far has been documented to have such a deep furrow or line across the line of their bill. And there it is on Munchie. It's harder to see because he's broken. But one of the nice things about him breaking is that he actually broke along the furrow, because that would be the most fragile part of the beak, because it will have thinner amounts of bone tissue there. So it's easy to identify that. Another one is that they have really well-defined nares or nostril holes, which was really weird to find out, because you'd think maybe ducks also, but no, albatross have the most defined nostrils. And then on Munchie, you can see right across here is where the nostril would have been preserved had it been in life. So this is awesome so far. He's having a lot of these albatross characteristics, which is great. But what do we do from here? We know that he's not a shearwater now. And so we now need to compare him to other extinct relatives of albatrosses and those modern ones to figure out where else he belongs. And so that I'm just reminding you and then adding in a little bit more on those ancestral albatrosses. He could be related to Platornis, which is one of the earliest known albatross species from New Zealand, and the super early Miocene/late Oligocene, so something about 30-40 million years, I think. There's the Astoria albatross, which maybe he was related to that, maybe not. But again, maybe he's more closely related to the modern stuff. We just don't know. Or, I mean, I know now, but we didn't know then. And so to do that, I'm going to walk you through a couple of those albatrosses I was first talking about. This is the documentation on Platornis. So that super early, really ancestral form of an albatross. You can see that he has a furrow, but it's really not well defined as the other species, especially in Munchie. And that concave culmen is very, very shallow. So at that very top, you can see a just slight slope down towards that beak. And again, he was found in New Zealand. And then when we compare that to Munchie, we can absolutely see that difference in that angle across here, then compared to that to Platornis. And then we have the Astoria albatross, which is the other albatross found in the Astoria Formation. He was identified by Meyer and Goddard, who are German paleontologists. Why they were in Oregon, we don't know, but that's okay. And you can see, I'm going to pull up a picture to compare the Astoria albatross to Munchie. One of the reasons, I'm going to backtrack just a moment, why the Astoria albatross is considered just the Astoria albatross and doesn't belong to a family group, a genus, or otherwise, aside from general albatross, is because he lacks a lot of the identifying features that could classify him further than just the albatross family. So things like a more concave, or he has a lot of those beak features, but a lot of those defining characteristics that distinguish the different species of albatross are in the cervical vertebra, which the Astoria albatross was not able to be, was not found with the rest of the remains of the Astoria albatross. It was just the beak and then some minor fragments of lower limb bones. And so Meyer and Goddard decided this is most likely a new species, but we're not confident in what family or genus group it would belong to, but it is something new, but more not anatomically modern. Is yeah, they're really, I've talked to them once through email. They were very nice.
They are studying a partial skull of another big bird that one of our members, Kent Gibson, found in the Astoria.
Oh, fantastic.
I know Gordon said.
Awesome. That's good to know. That might be that tooth bird I was talking about.
Yes, it's bird too.
Fantastic. It'd be good to look at that one too. All right. And so based on just physical observation between Platornis, the Astoria albatross, and Munchie, we can safely say that he is not related to either of those. He is a more derived or more modern type of albatross. And so our question is he a little bit earlier than, our wandering, or is he more closely related to our city or mollymox? And like I said before, that's going to come down to the vertebra. And I was very, very, very lucky because, we're going first to looking at how we determine between the modern albatross, and then I'll go into my fancy CT work. So this is comparing to that wandering albatross. So our largest albatross known today. We can see generally Munchie has a much thinner beak. It's much less robust, but that comb and curve is far deeper in Munchie than it is in the wandering albatross. So that's indicative that he's maybe not closer related to that wandering albatross, but maybe another type. And then we can do the same comparison to our North Pacific, and we really see a lot of similarities. They have that deep furrow. The nasal is a little bit further down the beak. The culmen, again, is much more curved. The beak itself is long and slender. So it's looking really closely like that North Pacific albatross. That's fun. But we still need to do our proper due diligence and figure out that he's not anyone else. And so I looked at city albatross and mollymox and forgot to put it in the presentation. But it turns out he doesn't really look like those beaks either. And so that next step would be CT scanning Munchie. And this is a picture of Munchie in the Zeiss scanner we have at the University of Oregon's campus. To orient you, this is where the x-rays are taken. In a CT scan, it's basically a three-dimensional x-ray. What happens is that your specimen is placed on this pedestal that's turned at fractions per second, and each turn gets its own x-ray, and they put that together in this fancy software to give you those 3D models of what you x-rayed, basically. And so I do this, and then I have to deal with this program. It turned out that Munchie was a little bit too tall, beak down, to capture the entire specimen. So we had to scan him twice and then splice it together, which is why the front little bit on this side is yellow on the screen and it is green on the other side, because that was where we spliced him together. And then this was me struggling to figure out where the matrix ends and the bones begin, which I'm still struggling through a little bit in the basocranium, but that's because I'm not very good with the 3D slicer yet. I'm trying. It's a really hard software to use. But it turns out once you get the hang of it, you can do stuff like this, where you're actually modeling what those vertebrae look like in 3 dimensions. And then for a little pizzazz, I got a little video of me turning around the atlas or C1, so cervical 1 vertebra. Oh, it did not do what I wanted it to do. Let's see if I click. Well, it was supposed to be a video. I apologize. It was the little vertebra spinning in space, basically. So that's basically what I did is I segmented out the first 3 vertebra and identified different features on them that indicated what species he is. And then to do that, I mostly focused on that North Pacific albatross because the beak indicated in its shape and size that it was not that of the wandering albatross. So I went straight, easiest path forward, the North Pacific albatross. And it turns out they are really freaking similar. First is that there's the opening. It's called the insura fossa, but it's just the opening to where the your vertebra or your skull sits on your vertebra, and it opens towards the back, which looks weird on this image, but basically this would be the back of where the skull would sit, and he sits right squarely on top of that. A lot of other vertebrate and birds, they don't have that fossa opening in that particular direction, which helps indicate that. The next was that there is a very derived transverse process, which means that it's more anatomically modern than it is not, or ancestral. And so I have that pointed out where it's the, so his head would be across here. This would be the forward part of your neck. This would be the back of your neck, is to orient to there. And then the third one, which like I cried tears of joy when I saw this, because this truly confirmed that he is a North Pacific anatomically modern albatross from the Miocene, is because they have a very developed fova cranioventralis, which is one of the places where it's your ligaments and some of your spinal tissues meet and go through the vertebra. So it's right here, which is, again, beautiful if you like anatomy. Yes, I saw the light of God. And so because of that, we can say that he fits right squarely in the North Pacific albatrosses. And that also, oh, here's his classification in his picture again. So he is in technically the genus Phobastria, which is that North Pacific or short-tailed albatross. So far it's species nova or new species. I've not decided on a name yet. I'm going to consult with some of the Siletz tribe folks who are interested in providing a name for him because he is found among their ancestral lands. And I find it very, very important to include indigenous voices, especially in US paleontology, and try and work against fighting against colonialism and awful stuff like that. And that when I confirm this with a couple of other little analyses I'm going to do on that back of the skull, or underneath the skull, I mean, will place him securely within the modern albatrosses and be the earliest known modern albatross by about 5 to 10 million years, depending on how good you date the Astoria Formation. And that's my talk. Woo! I would love to see an albatross in real life. I've just seen videos of them. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this person, she didn't have a question. She just said that she had sailed with them before, which is lovely. And I'm very jealous.
Water species close to
The North Pacific.
the Pacific.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the last time you showed the chart?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How big do you estimate his wingspan?
So her question was, how big do I estimate the wingspan? I honestly have no idea right now. Like I was chatting with you earlier, I don't know if this specimen is small in general, because that's the size of the general family for that ancient species of albatross, or if he's young and so he's small because he hasn't grown fully and died before he became an adult. With further analyses through the CT scanning, through dissecting and rebuilding the skull in 3 dimensions, I'll be able to see for pneumatization or those air pockets in bones that are found in birds and bird adjacent critters like theropod dinosaurs, and be able to see, is it highly pneumaticized like an adult bird skull would be, or is it not? And that would help give a general like, oh yeah, he's just a small bird, or he's small for his group. So yeah.
Going back to the Astoria albatross, which is not this, you were mentioning before that it would be different. Is the Astoria albatross still an albatross, or is it like different?
Yeah, let me go back to that slide while I repeat your question. Aaron was asking whether or not the Astoria albatross is an actual albatross still, or is it maybe some other type of bird? And couple more slides. There we go. So it does have defining features of an albatross, but not a modern albatross. And so we can tell that through that culmen that's not quite as developed or deep as the other modern ones are. There were some other features in the paper that they talked about in the fragment of limb bones they found that seemed to indicate maybe it's closer to wandering, maybe it's closer to Platornis. They still weren't 100% sure just based on what they were able to recover, but it's still within the, we would consider it a basal or early ancestral albatross, but not an anatomically modern one.
It's from the same time.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
At the same time, so, but that's common. I mean, yeah, well, I mean, it's not unheard of, but the competition, I mean, you've got big species diversity at that time.
Incredibly so.
It's two different species, but probably the same dietary habits.
So my best assumption with this, just going based on what I know of modern birds that share niche space or occupy similar environmental roles. If you think of forest or a temperate forest, there's lots of types of birds. I forget their name, but they're little songbirds, and they're different genera of the same group of birds. They act very similarly, but they only occupy certain sections of the trees versus the other ones that occupy higher places. So my assumption would be that they build similar roles, but did it slightly differently, if that makes sense.
Well, and maybe that's the answer I'm gonna have to live with, because my question was, what would the value be to Munchie to have that dish a little bit more in the beak versus the Astoria albatross? Do we have any hypotheses on?
So
What would a variety of distinction so that they could occupy that space?
So I don't know if there's a very good answer for why a certain albatross might have a slightly less deep culmen rather than a more scooped one. My best assumption would be based on maybe what they were eating, that something in the environment started selecting towards having a thinner, more concave beak. Maybe it's easier to pick up their squids that way, and so they're getting more food when they have a slightly more concave culmen. Maybe the shrimp fit better in the beak and it just makes it a little easier. Or it could be something called a spandrel in paleontology, where it's a feature that is comes about secondary to some other important adaptation, but that other adaptation doesn't really do anything itself. A really good example of that is horse faces. Why they are so long and big is secondarily adapted to their teeth getting so large. So it could also be something like that, but I don't have a very good answer aside from there's a bunch of possibilities. Yeah.
I actually went to state writing
Yeah, so that is called the diastema. The diastema just means the space between teeth. We also, as humans, have diastema. Ours are just very tiny in comparison. Elena might be able to answer that better as they are the horse expert in the room, if I can put you on the spot. Want to talk about horses for a minute? That is also true. You guys can combine your powers of horses and it will be beautiful. Yeah. But yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. Yeah.
How do you know what you're looking at is like the dip, that's an actual dip?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, so I can show you that. Let me find a really good picture. So Tara's question, for those in the chat that couldn't hear, I keep forgetting that the mouse doesn't work. Let's see. Let's get beautiful view. Okay. So from here, kind of a blurry picture, but kind of okay. So you can see that there's different textures when it comes to a bone that has been broken versus one that has been deformed versus one that naturally comes about in that shape. So an example of that, let me actually get a better picture. This, it looks better on the small screen than the big screen, but we can work with this. So this is also a good picture to show. And then I can show you also on the specimen itself, if that's easier as well. Anyone can come up and see that. So basically, if you look, there's, if this was a better quality photo for it, you could see that there are little chunks taken out on the sides of these bones where it's been worn away and broken, but you don't see that same kind of pattern or texture on the culmen itself where it has that curve. And so it just would be kind of improbable for it to have come about as some kind of distortion due to taphonomic or burial processes versus something it actually lived with. Yeah. It was from Willa, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
have you seen any chipping with adults or with young of live albatrosses? Private chipping, or if it's just worn out through the aging of fostering?
Yeah. Okay. So Elena's question was, how do we determine, or can we determine age based off the texture or broken bits off the actual hook of the beak when we can compare it to modern specimens that may share that same pathology or morphology? My guess is no, just because that's in this particular case with the specimen, the beak itself where it's broken is really worn and soft, so it's most likely from some sort of burial process where it was compressed in the rock and just broken off. If it were to happen to modern birds today, I also don't think you'd be able to tell the age of the specimen. Again, you find a lot of age-based estimates based in birds on whether the limb bones have fused, so their growth plates are fused and solid, as well as the greater amounts of whole space in the cranial bones themselves. So that would again be CT scan, figuring it out that way. That's a really good question, a good idea. Thank you. Thank you. That's okay.
Share. Recording.